I knew George in a way through his daughter, who often talked about him. She was one of my volunteers here in the room when I first started the job, or when I first became a volunteer here. And I got to know Lindsay very well in that time before she passed away. And I was very privileged when the 1914 came around and the whole World War I centenary was starting to happen, that Lindsay shared a lot of George's war life and what he did in the war, photographs, and his story. You know, his story is very important, I think, to the Gympie community.
So he was born here. His parents came from Wales, along with his older brother, and he went to school at 1 Mile.
He was a man who took a lot of pride in the community, even before the war.
So he joined the cadets in Gympie, and then he was a recruitment officer and area officer.
He was commissioned in 1911 into the Wide Bay Regiment. Appointed area officer of the Army Cadets in Gympie area in 1912. There was approximately 450 cadets in this community. He enlisted on the 2nd of September 1914 into the 9th Battalion, Australian Imperial Forces. He landed at Gallipoli with this battalion.
So George was in the landing on Gallipoli. I don't think it was actually in the first boatload, but he was in, you know, he was pretty close to being one of the first or some of the first boatloads. And he went to, and he fought. In some reports it says about 12 hours or something, and then he was injured. I think he was shot in the arm. He was taken to Alexandria Hospital. Unfortunately, the story goes that he was reported dead. So his family actually received telegrams from the Commonwealth Government and the Queensland Government, you know, saying how sorry for the loss.
The community had a memorial service.
His great-grandmother refused to believe that he was dead and wouldn't go to any services.
He was listed killed, but he was wounded. He actually read his name in the casualty list while he was in hospital recovering.
And he let them know, and he got in contact with his family and said, I'm fine, okay, all's good. I'll be coming home soon.
So when he come home, they had what they called a welcome home citizens reception for from the mayor, I should say, and the citizens of Gympie, and that was on the 12th of August 1915 at the town hall, as we call it, at the Five Ways it is now, and there was 2,000 people. So that in that era, that would have been every man in his dog, because that's 100 years ago.
He had time back here in Brisbane, and during that time was the start of the what is now the RSL, and he was at the first meeting for that. He's got a special place even within that organisation to do with Gympie.
Once he recovered, he enlisted in 20th of August 1916 into the 41st Battalion Australian Imperial Forces. Went through the war with that unit. He returned to Australia and on the 20th of May 1919 and was discharged.
So when he did eventually come home in 1919, he was, you know, very well respected.
So after World War I, he came back and he worked with his brother for a little while in real estate and auctioneering, and then they parted company and he opened up his own shop in Lower Mary Street, also involving real estate and auctioneering, and he was a representative for banana growers.
His RSL commitment, and to this RSL, he was a member from 1919 to 1964. Positions held: President, Trustee and Treasurer.
He was the person who always marshalled the Anzac Day parades.
He led the Anzac Day March for many, many, many years and still wore his original uniform. He used to tell us stories about the war, not really personal stories that would involve dreadful things, but lots of little stories about the war, including showing us the bullet that came from his shoulder. He became Mayor of Gympie between 1924 and 1927, and at that time the person who got the most votes became the mayor, and that's how he became mayor. So he was mayor for those 3 years, but stopped after that because the public service element was too much for his family. He had 3 young children, and so he stopped being mayor at the wishes of my grandmother.
And his brother Luke was also mayor twice or 3 times, can't remember exactly. So they were very civic-minded men.
Then when World War II came, he was still involved with the army, and he worked as recruitment officer and manpower officer, intelligence officer for the region from Inskip Point to Noosa.
He used to also go and give talks at different places around Queensland at different conferences, and he was in a conference for the Wide Bay and Burnett up in Bundaberg, and he was giving a talk. And at the end of the session, this man, whose name was Mr. Williams, came up to him and said, "I recognise your voice." And he handed George the diary that he had lost when he was injured at Gallipoli.
So he got his diary back 20-something years later on, but that diary now has the entries of 2 World War I soldiers in it. He was very involved in public works, even when he wasn't on council. So he was a start-up member of things like the Rifle Club and the Fire Brigade Board, and he was involved in the Masonic Lodge and the Golf Club, beginning member of the Golf Club for many years.
He saw Gympie as an important place, and he knew the community because of the job he was in.
All the way through until his death, really. He was involved in all of those things. He was very civic-minded, and he didn't ever stop doing that.
I suppose the biggest legacy that he left Gympie was his continued interest in the RSL and the returned servicemen of the town.
To my left and to my right are all our life members. So they are the ones that keep an eye on us, I feel.
I suppose he was just a proud person of the place he came from.
So basically he was an army man to his death. He was a very disciplined person, and I think his involvement in all of those organisations is a lasting thing for Gympie. And for us, he was simply a very good role model.